Welcome to this explainer. When we look at the mechanics of power, it's impossible to ignore Niccolo Machiavelli. Today, we're taking his infamous 16th century survival guide and mapping it directly onto the modern rules of power. It's going to be a fascinating look at how the game is actually played.
Right off the bat, let's look at this blunt reality check. Life isn't fair. It never was. The quiet truth here is that the world absolutely does not care about your kindness. Life is essentially a silent battlefield. Someone is always plotting their next move, trying to outsmart you. And look, if you don't know how to see the board and play the game, well, you're the one being played. To give you a clear picture of how this works, our agenda today maps out this dark psychology playbook visually. We'll quickly run through the modern rules of power, look at the man behind the myth, explore the lion and the fox, unpack love, fear, and cruelty, and finally wrap up with leaving a legacy. All right, jumping right into part 1, the modern rules of power, and how to master that silent battlefield. Just look at the absolute emptiness of this. That void perfectly captures a major rule from modern dark psychology. Silence is literally your greatest weapon. Why? Well, because words are cheap, but silence? Silence is expensive. When you just stay quiet, you force everyone else to overthink. They get uncomfortable, they start fidgeting, and ultimately they reveal their own secrets just to fill that empty space. Building on that visual of emptiness, modern interpretations focus on these strategies to make yourself completely unreadable. You never show all your cards. Keeping that mystery alive breeds respect. You've got to control your emotions, because the calmest person in the room almost always wins. It's about creating these invisible chains of dependency where you work and live. You master the art of disguise to blend in while moving your pieces, and finally, use absence to gain respect. You know the saying, familiarity breeds contempt, will disappear for a bit, and let your value grow in the shadows. Let's transition to part 2, the man behind the myth, and take a look at 16th century Florence. Now, pulling back the curtain on Renaissance Italy, it was pure chaos. Just look at this timeline. It was defined by shifting alliances and extreme volatility. You have this devastating French invasion in 1494 that completely shattered the balance of power. Machiavelli was actually serving as a diplomat for Florence during all this intense turmoil. But then, a brutal reversal of fortune in 1512 led to his dismissal, imprisonment, and literally his torture. He watched kings rise and fall and saw blind trust turn into brutal betrayal right before his eyes. And because of that intense instability, his philosophy wasn't born out of some cartoonish cruelty. It came from absolute necessity. Scholars note that words like necessity, must, and have to just recur obsessively in his writing. Picture a guy writing with his back against the wall. What's at stake here is basic, ground-level survival. Anything extra is just a luxury. And his blunt honesty about all this? It ultimately sealed his fate. Written in exile on a tiny farm, his book became so universally famous and scandalous that the Pope literally put it on the index of prohibited books. The church called it the work of Satan's finger. Yet, behind closed doors, rulers and thinkers all across Europe just couldn't stop reading it. Moving on to part 3, the lion and the fox, and this fascinating duality of survival. Machiavelli points us to this incredibly vivid image of Chiron the centaur from ancient mythology. Chiron was half man, half beast, and he tutored legends like Achilles. Machiavelli uses this image to explain that playing strictly by the rules of men, it's just not enough. A leader has to know how to tap into the beast within. If you only play one side, you simply won't survive the landscape. So he splits this animal nature into 2 distinct halves. You've got to be a fox to see the hidden snares and traps laid out for you, and a lion to terrify the wolves circling your territory. If you just play the lion and rely on brute force, you're flying blind. You have to be adaptable, seamlessly switching masks when the situation calls for it. Which brings us to this gem. Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. The smartest player on the board doesn't just muscle their way through. They understand that the quiet, almost invisible first move of deception often dictates the entire game. You absolutely have to outwit your opponents before they even realize you're playing. Let's dive into part 4, love, fear, and cruelty, and how to manage unpredictable human nature. Looking at this table, Machiavelli weighs the traits we're supposed to praise, like generosity, compassion, straightforwardness, against the ones we blame. But here's his massive warning. Trying to be entirely good in a world full of bad actors is a guaranteed way to lose everything. If you always act morally, you are putting a giant target on your back among those who, frankly, don't care about the rules.
This leads to his most famous debate. Is it better to be loved or feared? Well, think about it. Love makes people comfortable, and eventually, comfortable people will test your boundaries. Fear, on the other hand, keeps people sharp and alert. He concluded that since human loyalty is inherently selfish and incredibly fragile, a calculated dose of fear is just a much more reliable anchor for maintaining control.
To really paint a picture of this, he points to decisive leaders like Cesare Borgia. Borgia used these calculated, highly visual, shocking spectacles to make a point. For instance, he had his own brutal minister, Ramiro de Orco, executed and left in the public square. It was a wild psychological play. The public was gratified that this cruel guy was dead, but simultaneously terrified of Borgia's raw power. It instantly restored order through sheer exemplary shock value.
And when it comes to how you look to the outside world, you don't actually need to possess all these noble virtues. Honestly, practicing them 24/7 is dangerous. You just need to project the illusion flawlessly. Seem compassionate, loyal, honest, and religious. But internally, be fully prepared to flip the script the second your interests are threatened. The crowd, as he notes, is always won over by appearances. Finally, let's wrap things up with Part 5, Leaving a Legacy, the Ultimate Final Move. Both historical texts and modern dark psychology align perfectly on this specific mindset. I don't chase power, I become it. True power isn't about making a ton of noise or flashing your success. It's about building this unshakable, invisible foundation in the shadows. The quietest rise is, without a doubt, the deadliest rise.
So, mapping out the steps to get there. First, you master your emotions so you can't be manipulated. Second, you control the flow of information. Misdirection keeps your enemies chasing shadows instead of you. Third, you crush threats early before they snowball into disasters. And fourth, you focus all your energy on moves that expand your long-term influence to build a legacy that lasts.
Legacy is the echo you leave behind when you no longer need to speak. I love that phrasing. Your ultimate goal here isn't to win petty day-to-day arguments. It's to carve your reputation into the minds of others so deeply, so permanently, that your mere absence commands absolute respect. You are playing for the long game, not for a quick round of applause. So I'll leave you with this provocative thought to chew on regarding your own life and the invisible networks you're building right now. If you disappeared tomorrow, would your presence still be felt? Are you moving with clear, long-term visual intention, or are you just blindly reacting to the noise around you? The fundamental truth you have to see is that power isn't just violently taken in a single moment. It is methodically built through every choice, every intentional silence, and every calculated move. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Remember to watch more, speak less, and start building your power strategically.